I know I'm not the only Black girl who's experienced this. Being put through hell by the mother of a guy you were dating. And no, I don't mean a grown mama's boy. That's a whole other podcast episode in and of itself. But I mean being a minor, a child, somebody's child that's young enough that if the mother decided to do something crazy, she would likely go to jail for some flavor of a child endangerment charge. And yet, you dealt with her mistreatment because you thought it was a normal part of your quote unquote relationship with that boy who likely left stains in his boxers that she was happy to shout out on Sunday mornings. Welcome back to season 2 of the podcast. Different name, same concept. I've got things to say about everything. This season, we're doubling down on the mental health content, continuing to ponder the randomness of life, and trying to keep some laughs sprinkled in between. You can keep up with me on Instagram and Threads at Pat Pontificates and subscribe to the weekly newsletter at patpontificates.com. All links are provided in the show notes. I'm your host, Patrice, preaching authenticity, wellness, and freedom to the masses. Let's disrupt. Y'all are entirely too committed to bullying little Black girls. Black children, but little Black girls. It's wild for me to consider how many grown ass women made it their business to terrorize me because, let's be clear, their horny ass son took an interest in me. It's not quite as popularized or as popular as the father who shows up at the door with a gun for his daughter's prom date, because it's not that viral moment. Let me just say that's also very freaking ridiculous and thoughts that I'm not going to share here today, but very ridiculous. But the mom terrorizing the little girl is happening. And let me just say, y'all are weird ass bullies. I have some stories. So, when I was 13, there was a dude who is the reason why I stopped calling house phones while those were still a thing, because I know. But his mother used to press me on the phone for calling her 15-year-old son. Once or twice, she pressed me about like not believing that I was barely a teenage girl, telling me that I sounded like a grown ass woman, even though like she still, after all that, would turn the phone over to her kid. So like, if there was a real threat, she clearly wasn't concerned enough to hang up on me. And then there were like other times where I would hear her grumbling about me while I was waiting for her to give him the phone. Like just saying like, under her breath things about like who I really am and all that type of stuff. And talking about me to whoever else was in the room. And sometimes, I really suspected it wasn't even nobody else there. She just wanted me to hear her talking shit. And what's crazy, I don't even understand. I had a cell phone. None of these dudes never had a cell phone at the time. And I would be the one having to call a house phone. I don't know. Young love, I guess. Then, in another situation, not too long after that, still a teenager, I there was one person whose boy person was absolutely too old to be dating me. Okay. And she used to terrorize me like I was the scum of the earth, even though I was absolutely a 15-year-old high school senior. Let's be fucking for real. And yeah, that's one moment that I'm gonna do that. And I would later learn that apparently, like, one of the many things was like I didn't smile enough for her. Um, and she actually didn't start speaking to me again until sometime around the time I was getting ready to graduate college, if I remember correctly. Like some years passed, that relationship was way behind me and all that. And all of a sudden she was like greeting me and shit. Not all of a sudden, but I noticed like, oh, she speaks. While me and said person were dating, she like conspired against me so hard. Like it wasn't even just a cold shoulder. It wasn't even just like mean moments. Like, cause she wouldn't really interact with me. She would like tattle on me to my parent, link up with him to report that like, I was on the phone with him late at night. I believe the narrative was like maybe that I was distracting him, or maybe she spun it like she was concerned that he was distracting me. I kind of forget what it really was, because after all, I was the one that was headed to college at the end of that school year, and he wasn't. It was real life psychological warfare, to be honest. And she was successful too, because I remember like one parent teacher conference, my dad comes to the school. I got a 91 that marking period in English. Now, I'm talking about people who are intentionally bullies, but I feel like there are other ways that Black women help to terrorize young Black girls that are wholly unnecessary. And I'm gonna say she was well meaning, but at the same time, I really don't understand. So, my English teacher, who was also a Black woman, thought it was necessary to tell my dad that I got a 65 on one of my vocabulary tests. So I explained that basically I forgot. So 65 on the vocabulary test, one test, but I got a 91 at the end of the marking period. Okay. So I explained like I forgot that I had the test and I forgot to study for it. And my dad exploded, and that was like the nail in the coffin for my situation. He was like he was gonna put a stop to me and old boy talking to each other because we talk all the time. That must be why I forgot. And I was distraught. Like, now in a longer, more complicated story, I ended up breaking up with him because his response to my distraughtness was not like good enough for me. Like, and if I was to really think about it, dating him was not worth the special ops boot camp I was going through to be met with any level of nonchalance on his side. Like, now, like, I'm in trouble and I'm just like seen as this rebel child that I never was. Um, and you're just kind of like, eh. And it's your people who is helping to fan the flames. I had my experience with the mom of the son who doesn't think you're good enough for their kid, when you're literally doing so much better than that little boy. So shout out to his weird ass mama. But like, she also didn't speak to me for real. And like, I wasn't like, it wasn't anything hostile, but like, I wasn't schemed on, you know, but it was certainly not gonna, like, I was not to get anything twisted because I was not to be taken seriously. I was given the cold shoulder, but the boy was a devil. So it was a favor. But then you handed the devil off to somebody else. So bless God. Worse, in that situation though, there were women who were close to that person that I was dating who also decided that he was God's gift to me and all but threatened me about him. They were like, they were gonna be keeping an eye on me about their little brother, grown ass women, right? Some of them who I hadn't even spoken to, they, we grew up in the same church situation or whatever, but hadn't spoken to in years, didn't know who the hell they, like, for real, didn't know who they were. All that, see them around, never spoke to me. Now I'm dating this dude. You got words for me. To be clear about who I was as a kid versus who I am on this podcast, there was absolutely nothing wild about me. Okay. They were literally terrorizing the nerdiest, most sheltered kid on the block. And like, I didn't have cable TV until my parents split and tried to entice us into their respective homes. Okay. Like, there's so many references to Black movies that I don't know because I was not allowed to watch them in my house. White chicks, I think I saw White Chicks in college. Okay, like, let's calm down here. But it didn't matter, right? Like, the thing about these stories, just because I was interested in this dude, dealing with this dude, I was now a target of their bullying. Like, let's just call it what it is. When you're talking crazy to a child, it's not yours, with no real reason to do so, that's bullying. And the thing about these stories that I think about now as an adult, is that while I was dating in two of these scenarios, the last two scenarios, my parents were separated. And I had a contentious relationship with my mom, and I really could have used like some women deciding to take me under their wing, as opposed to treating me like an adversary, a menace, and let's be clear, a slut. I have, mother issues currently, which I talk about all the time. Not just like from the relationship that I had with my mother, but from all the people who were in these positions to be some kind of like maternal example in my life, especially as like church goes, right? But decided instead that I wasn't worthy of being taken care of. Like, didn't treat me like I was the child that I actually was. And this is why I'm so enraged when y'all talk about little girls as fast and all this stuff, because you are just setting it up the stage so that you can bully a little girl by labeling her as all these things that she might not actually be. And I've seen that a lot in therapeutic situations, just so you can enact this level of violence with a clear conscience. So I have this thing and this feeling about like Black women in authority over me who pick at the things that I'm doing incorrectly, but don't seem to then have an instruction book on how I can fix whatever they wanted me to fix, even according to their own rules. And it was kind of like this glee over being able to correct, because you were already supposed to come a certain way. And sometimes I feel like they feel like, they just figured it out, but they just figured it out because someone also terrorized the fuck out of them. And then they were able to piece things together. So very much this trial by fire type of situation. And it was the same thing, that same idea is what spilled out in these women deciding that they didn't like me as a person at fucking 15, 13, and 16 years old. And, I think I spoke about this before on the podcast, how my therapist at one point was like, it sounds like you were criticized but not taught. And then I like fell apart because it was such, it was a straightforward observation and, insight, but it felt like there was such empathy in that for me, because especially as someone who was always seen as smart, there was never any room for me to learn anything that I didn't know. I was supposed to just know it. And so when I had this experience with other people where they were like, yeah, you're not good enough, but it was like, I didn't know what good enough looked like for you. There was never a chance to reach good enough. And that's something that is not, I was criticized for not being enough woman or feminine enough as a child or in whatever space, but no one had the patience to show me how to do that woman thing, right? And even in teaching me, there was this air of like contempt and annoyance that I had to be shown. Annoyance at, which I had translated to be like annoyance at my existence in general. Now I'm gonna be a little deep here, and it is what it is. It's kind of like how y'all get when somebody doesn't know how to play spades. Like, I know that'd be a hee ha ha joke, but as I get older, that shit actually gets on my nerves, because how a lot of y'all treat things in our community overall, especially with children. Like, just annoyance that I don't know what I don't know, and annoyance that you might have to teach me and you decide you're just not going to. And then there's an additional layer of like me being less than as a person because I don't know it. It doesn't start nor stop at spades. Like, kill the messenger, but I just don't find that shit funny anymore at all. Like the memes and shit about, oh, this person don't know how to play spades. I don't find it funny. Y'all do it with everything. Because explain to me what's common sense about a card game. And be so for real. Everything gets put under this common sense umbrella. And first of all, like, words mean things. Words mean fucking things, right? And there's a lot of things regarding rearing and being like a person that why would it be inherent to anybody's experience? Just because you had to learn it because you were neglected, doesn't mean that I should know it as well. Like, you didn't, like, newsflash, if you learned it because of neglect and trauma, you learned it. You didn't come out the womb knowing how to make a toilet bowl clean because you are a girl and you were supposed to clean toilet bowl. So people having a little bit of patience with Black girls seems to be like a crazy concept. And as a therapist, I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely not normal to be beefing with other children about your children. When I say also having patience with Black girls, right? As a person who does trauma therapy, like, a lot of the girls you call fast have been abused. And if they really are actually within that definition of fast, because y'all be calling people fast because they wear lip gloss and have weave. So, I mean, actually, like, someone is being promiscuous at a young age. If you were patient, if you took the time to listen, make sense of certain things, you would get their context. But you don't want to do that, because then you wouldn't be able to be mean to this person. And most of the time, this is my real point, all of that's being done and said towards little girls and little children is done as a projection of shit that you are living with and sitting with in your everyday life based on what your life has been like. There's absolutely nothing that can make you hate a child outside of some shit you need to work out. You were hated as a child. You believed the people who told you that you were a terrible person, and now you see a child. I remember one time that I was talking to my supervisor about a particular kid, and I had all these frustrations, and rightfully so, but your frustrations are like evidence for something bigger also. And so I remember at one point I stopped and I was like, you know what? I think one of the reasons why I feel XYZ way and trying to figure out what's going on here is because I am actually, like, she reminds me of myself. It was a young girl. She reminds me of myself at her age, but at her age, I would have just taken the words that adults say. I wouldn't be asking questions. I wouldn't be requesting for our session to go differently. I wouldn't, say, I don't want to talk about XYZ thing. And I was annoyed that she had the nerve to ask for what she needed, knowing that I never asked for what I needed as a kid. I obviously did not bully this child because some of my sessions were observed. I had to write notes. That is not what happened. I was just dealing with feelings that I internalized during the session. Having that realization, it was one, not that like I was a terrible person for having these feelings. We're going to have feelings and they are what they are. But it was, okay, that shit has nothing to do with her, right? So step one is figuring that the fuck out. And then step two is some self-empathy, just some empathy for the fact that, like, I was a child who did not have agency over myself. And I learned that was not a thing. And so now in these moments where I was questioned and I, sometimes was caught off guard by the questions, I had to figure out how to respond to that as a person who understood that children had agency. But it was harder for me to figure out how to respond to that, quickly in the moment, because I had no concept for how that played out in my life. So, one, figure it the fuck out, because that's not nobody else's problem. But then two, I'm sorry that happened to you. And then get help for that and get someone to empathize with you for that. Not too long after this, I went to therapy. Not too long after this, I found a therapist. I'm pretty sure. But if people were more honest about the fact that, not even more honest, take a pause and think about where this shit is coming from. Like, I think y'all are so comfortable being nasty to kids, and you don't see how weak that looks when it plays out, right? We can think about it in a bunch of other circumstances. People abuse their power, but we don't think about children as like fully formed people who are allowed to be people. Now, I'm not talking to the people who feel like children should be mollywopped up and down the place. I'm not talking to people who, regardless of anything, they will, beat a child with a chair. Because that's a level of loss that this podcast is not going to convince you about of anything. But I'm talking to people who really perhaps even just had these experiences where people were bullying them and they did not recognize it as such. They just saw it as par for the course. This is just what happened. Oh, somebody was correcting me. They were doing it. That was not what that was, girl. And real quick, even for the little boys, a lot of the things that toughen up, that man up, that is somebody else inflicting on you what they think it means for. Basically, this is why that I went through it. You got to go through it too. That don't work for me. And I've dealt with a lot of that in the workplace. I dealt with that in academia as well. And when I really had to think about how miserable those people were, it kind of helps you shake it off a little bit. But at the same time, it makes you angry that the only reason why I was put through hell is because this person was unhappy with themselves. But I also feel like it's not that hard to take a step back. It's that there's a choice in that refusal to take a step back. It's not innate. It's not, this is how it should be. You don't even think about the fact that you are fucking 55 and your arch nemesis is 12. Because that makes sense to you. A lot of the people who be like, these kids is this and these kids is that, and it's because that's what somebody told them they were, and they were never able to think about themselves any differently. Now, I'm going to deviate a little bit from the real point of this episode, but it kind of goes into it, right? There's a bunch of y'all who take this weird ass humbling of Black girls into the workplace based on age, superiority, a superiority thing based on where you are in the hierarchy versus the person that you're trying to get at. But this is why the older I get, the more obnoxious I'm becoming about how dope I am as a person. Because if you're going to buck at me regardless, I'm certainly going to give you something to be mad at, and I'm going to bark back, right? When I was a kid, I just let people bully me because I was trained up that way. And it's not even to be I should have done differently. That's just what it was. But there's some kids, I say let it happen, because there's some kids where that's not fucking flying, and shout out to them, right? I was led to believe that no matter what an adult was saying to me, I was supposed to be respectful, even in the face of the utmost self-esteem killing disrespect. This is why I'm all for those parents who train their children to not let strangers say crazy things to them, regardless of the position those strangers hold. I don't care if it's a teacher, the damn pastor in the pulpit. It could be Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's not happening. So yeah, in my work experience, I was already younger because I went to college younger. So I came out the gate younger than other people when I did certain things, right? And it's biting me in the ass more now, even as I try to get considered for roles that I am qualified for on paper, sometimes even overqualified for based on what they're asking for and what the role description actually is. And then when I show up in the interview, they're asking me all these questions, trying to question what it is I really do, what it is I really did in these very specific ways. I've been in, executive level internships and stuff like that. Interviews and stuff like that. And I know the kinds of questions they ask when they really want to assess versus why are you here, right? And I can also tell when someone's looking at me and peering into my face really long because they're trying to figure out how the fuck old I am. It happens to me all the time. I can tell when someone is trying to sun me based on what they think their perceived age difference is over me, and like, why would my young ass have these levels of experiences or be in this room? Whereas I look like slightly younger than my actual age, that's already kind of young. So, woe is me. But I'm gonna give you a couple examples, or at least one good example for now, and if I think of something else. I remember one time I was going into my job. It was in like an office suite thing in Baltimore, but like not like there's a doorman downstairs. It's just you have a key card to get into the first door, and then you walk to your suite and you're in the next door, right? Like it's not nothing official. It's very laid back kind of situation. And I remember one day a Black woman that works for a completely different office suite, because I've seen her go into it before. And that day I pulled up to work with my Uggs on and whatever else, looking real regular, because I usually do. That we didn't have any real dress code besides, meetings and events. And the door was open behind her, or something like that. And I came in behind her, and she turned. Now I told you I've seen this person before. She turned around and looked at me and she said, like, who are you coming to see? As I mentioned, there's no security. She's not in that capacity. She works in a completely different office. Right? And I looked at her like mad confused. I was like, I work here. And I don't even think she responded to me. She just kind of turned away and kept walking. Middle-aged Black woman. And as I was saying, I work here, I wished, like I was realizing what was going on. And I wish I didn't open my fucking mouth, because I'm the queen of ignoring stupid questions. Yes, stupid questions exist. And because stupid questions exist, I'm gonna just stop there. So she was basically like, what is your tacky, like young looking, non-dressed up ass doing up in here? Because clearly it's not possible that me walked in at fucking 9:05 or something like that means that I have business in here. And even if I didn't work there, I obviously knew what I was doing and knew where I was going. None of your business. But she felt it necessary to check me like, what's your business here? And this kind of dynamic also plays out in my supervisor relationships, right? That once it gets to the point where I am not just the young girl who needs to be mothered or guided, people are irrationally upset at that dynamic in our working relationship. And that played out more for me when I had Black women as supervisors. I just got to keep it very fucking real. And I didn't realize that I had an issue with, I guess I'll put it this way, Black women in authority until I was actually in my program before. So yeah, I was in my counseling program and I was a TA, and my professor did this exercise that I was like the test subject for this exercise. It's like a full counseling exercise or something, or it was something that happened. And I basically like had to admit to this white woman who's very good at her job that like I have issues, like I have mother issues, and that plays out in like me not being able to form like really like meaningful relationships with Black women who are older than me. Like I also play into it by having this deference. But then when it's like I'm deferring to someone who is like doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, now I become a little bit rebellious, and the whole situation goes to shit. And I remember telling people that I had like I've gone through multiple therapists, and one of the threads, most of them were all Black women except for one. And one of the threads was like, yo, I feel like they were trying to like mother me, and that's not what I came to therapy for. I came to therapy because you know more than me about what I'm dealing with. I can tell you what I'm dealing with. I can tell you what I'm dealing with. But when it comes down to the analysis, I might be missing something. And that's not what they were giving me. They were giving me what they felt I needed to have based on their assessment of my personality and my context, the little bit of context they did have, and not like what I was not good enough